Hey YouTube, I'm back again with my NFL predictions for week 4. Man, has this season started off weird and unpredictable. I mean, the Vikings, Steelers, and Seahawks are the undefeated teams alongside the Chiefs and Bills. The Bengals and Jaguars are 0-3. The 49ers, Cowboys, and Ravens are 1-2. Like, what is going on? As you can tell, I didn't do great again this past week in predictions, going 7-9 for the second week straight in an unpredictable first 3 weeks, in which the only for sure thing is the Chiefs are 3-0. So that means I now have an overall record of 25-21. Now that we are caught up there, let's get into the video. Up first, we have the Dallas Cowboys versus the New York Giants. The Cowboys had an ugly loss against the Ravens, in which the Ravens really did whatever they wanted on offense, with Lamar Jackson going 12 of 15 for 182 yards and a touchdown, while also rushing for 87 yards, and Derrick Henry making the Cowboys regret not trying to get him in free agency by rushing for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cowboys defense wasn't the only thing that looked terrible, as the offense only put up 6 points in the first 3 quarters, and most of their yards and points were put up in pretty much garbage time. As for the Giants, they had a nice win over the Cleveland Browns, who seemed to have been better off with Joe Flacco last year. Giants still don't have a great run game, but Daniel Jones had himself a nice game, going 24 of 34 for 236 yards and 2 touchdowns, both to Malik Neighbors, who over the past couple weeks seems to be growing a good connection with Daniel Jones. Honestly, I would not be surprised if the Cowboys lose here, but Dak literally has not lost to the Giants, a division rival, since his rookie season. So I'm taking the Cowboys to win. Well now, this is a much harder game to predict than what I figured before the season. We got the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Carolina Panthers. Bengals starting off 0-3, losing to the Commanders, in which Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense looked good, but their defense struggled to stop Jalen Daniels as he went 21 of 23 for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the Commanders put up 38 points. Panthers, on the other hand, look like a completely different team from the rest of the season, as they had an effective run game with Chuba Hubbard going for 114 yards and Andy Dalton going 26 of 37 for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns. I was ready to award the Panthers the #1 overall pick again, but man, they put a competent QB in there and they performed well, which spells disaster for Bryce Young and Carolina, given his inability to do anything offensively with the same team. I guess this now might be the upset pick, but for this game, I'm gonna take the Bengals to win in a must-win game versus a team coming off a high from this week's performance. Up next, we have the New Orleans Saints versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Saints come crashing down to earth hard, losing to the Eagles, who honestly is the first decent run offense the Saints have faced this year, and boy did the Eagles show that, with honestly a sneaky MVP candidate in Saquon Barkley putting up big numbers against them. The Saints also really struggled on offense, only scoring 12 points. They now take on division rival, the Falcons, who lost a close one to the Chiefs, in which the real difference in this game was the Falcons' inability to run, only rushing for 82 yards, even when they led for the whole first half of the game. Despite that, they lost the time of possession battle for 10 minutes, and even with Isaiah Pacheco out injured, the Chiefs still ran for 128 yards. As for the Saints versus the Falcons, I'm really not sure which of these teams are legit yet, but I'm feeling frisky about this one, and I think the Falcons can expose the Saints' run defense and come away with a W in Week 4. For our next matchup, is this really a game that needs much said? It's the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Houston Texans. Jaguars' only redeeming quality throughout the first 2 weeks was their defense, who just got destroyed by the Bills. Texans, on the other hand, also had a bad blowout loss versus the Vikings, in which, if you look at the stats, this game was almost identical between the two teams, but the Vikings capitalized on shorter field starts with Sam Darnold throwing for 4 touchdowns and Aaron Jones running for over 100 yards. Even with all that, this is probably the straightforward pick of the week, in which I have the Texans beating the Jaguars in a good bounce back game. Then we got the Denver Broncos versus the New York Jets. Now, honestly, I was flirting with the idea of picking the Broncos over the Bucks only because the Bucks just won a tough and hard-fought game against the Lions the week before, but it was the Broncos, so I couldn't convince myself. That being said, the Broncos did upset the Buccaneers, in which the Broncos put up 14 points in the first quarter, and that was already enough to win, as the Denver defense held the Bucks to 7 points and 223 yards of total offense. The Jets did what they were supposed to do by dominating the Patriots by holding them to 3 points, and with Aaron Rodgers going 27 of 35 for 281 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Jets looked impressive against a weaker team, which is what you want to see from a team with hopes this year. I think this is a similar situation as last week, in a game they should win, which they showed they can do, and in dominating fashion. So I'm sticking with the Jets to win 3 in a row. Next up, we got an interesting one. It's the Minnesota Vikings versus the Green Bay Packers. Vikings coming off yet another dominating performance, with Darnold throwing for 4 touchdowns and Aaron Jones rushing for over 100 yards over what looked like a solid Texans defense. Packers won their game against the Titans, in which Malik Willis looked good again, throwing for over 200 yards and a touchdown. Report seems to be Jordan Love is back at practice, but as of recording this, it is still unclear if he will play this week. This is the first time I'm doing something like this, but I am choosing the Vikings to win. However, if Jordan Love is playing, I will take the Packers to upset the Vikings, so my pick is decided on if Jordan Love starts the game or not. Then it's the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Indianapolis Colts. The Steelers have started off 3-0 and have 2 wins over second place in the division, while only allowing 26 points all season. Although I do think if Justin Herbert doesn't get injured, the Chargers likely win that game, the Steelers still held the Chargers to 168 total yards and only 61 rushing yards after the Chargers have been running through teams at will. Their offense didn't look too bad either, with 346 yards of total offense, but this defense definitely won them this game. As for the Colts, man, was that an ugly game for the first 3 quarters, in which between the Colts and the Bears, they were trying to give the other team the win, with each quarterback throwing 2 interceptions. The Colts won mainly due to explosive plays, but mostly their run game, with Jonathan Taylor running for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. When talking about this game, it just has to be the Steelers and that overbearing defense that through 3 weeks is the best in the league. So give me the Steelers to win. Next is the LA Rams versus the Chicago Bears. Rams coming off a nice win over the 49ers, showing some grit as they started off the game down 14-0 in the first quarter. The Rams really didn't play a great game, but their defense definitely was a bend but don't break for the last 3 quarters, while their offense took its time in key downs late, going 2 for 2 on 4th downs and getting enough out of their offense to come up with a win. As far as the Bears, don't look at the stat line. If you did, you would see Caleb Williams going 33 of 52 for 363 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. However, most of this was late in the game after not being able to move the ball, and when they did make big splash plays, Caleb would just turn the ball over. I thought the Bears defense would win them this game, but I was just asking too much of this defense. With the Rams versus Bears, I could see this going either way, as the Rams defense has been lackluster so far this year, but I'm just going to pick the better quarterback and better coach to win, so give me the Rams. Up next, it's the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Eagles coming off a win versus the Saints, in which their defense actually looked good for once since early last year. Eagles defense holding the Saints offense to only 219 total yards and 12 points, while the Eagles offense put up 460 yards with Saquon Barkley going for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. Saquon is looking like the MVP for the Eagles, bailing Jalen Hurts out of the terrible turnovers he has been making this season, and could be a contender for MVP this year if the Eagles continue to win. Then we have the Buccaneers, who just got manhandled by the Broncos. I did think coming off a tough win over the Lions the week before could lead to an upset, but still picked them. Now I'm in the opposite mindset. I think coming off a humiliating loss is going to light a fire under them, and they're going to win at home versus the Eagles. Then it's the New England Patriots versus the San Francisco 49ers. Patriots, honestly, there isn't much to say about their game other than they didn't show up. Their offense only put up 139 yards in a 60-minute game. As for the 49ers, they started off hot against the Rams, but took their foot off the gas too soon. Even without Kittle, Debo, and CMC, Purdy put up 292 yards and 3 touchdowns, all to Juwan Jennings, who is looking more and more like a breakout for the 49ers offense with the versatility he provides. This was an ugly loss for the 49ers as they lost a game they had no right losing, and that type of loss can really hinder a team's motivation moving forward. However, the 49ers are a well-coached team, and I feel they will be able to bounce back and win over the Patriots in Week 4. Next, we got a fun one in the Washington Commanders versus the Arizona Cardinals. In Week 1, I predicted Jaden Daniels would be Rookie of the Year, and boy did he show that potential when he went 21 of 23 for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns with multiple perfectly placed dimes. This guy really does have potential, but this defense is still struggling, giving up 33 points and 436 yards of offense to the Bengals. They take on a Cardinals team that I honestly think have the potential to be a wild card team, but with a tough schedule, these next couple games are very important to make that potential a reality or not. As weird as this may sound, I think the home advantage is a deciding factor in this game, so I'm picking the Cardinals to win this Week 4 matchup. And then we got the Kansas City Chiefs versus the LA Chargers. Chiefs, of course, finding a way to win over the Falcons, in which, again, they still don't look like they are playing well, and yet they never lose, which just means they will be very scary once things start to click with their new weapons. The Chargers coming off a loss versus the Steelers, which I think if Justin Herbert doesn't get injured in the game, the Chargers probably win that game. That being said, even if Justin Herbert plays this game, he isn't going to be 100%, and so I'm picking the Chiefs to go 4-0 through Week 4. Next, it's a game that if I wasn't doing YouTube videos, I probably wouldn't even watch. It's the Cleveland Browns versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Browns lost to the Giants, so that is enough said as it is, but they also only put up 217 yards of total offense. The Raiders, on the other hand, made the Panthers look like a playoff team. I really don't know how you are supposed to predict a game like this, but give me the Browns to win solely because I do like the Browns head coach, Kevin Stefanski, and I think he can outcoach the Raiders coach, Antonio Pierce. Then we got the Buffalo Bills versus the Baltimore Ravens. The Bills coming off a dominating performance over the Jaguars in which Josh Allen threw for 263 yards and 4 touchdowns. From the start of that game, it was clearly a mismatch in which by halftime it was 34-3. As for the Ravens, they did what they should have been doing all year in feeding Derrick Henry the ball as he went for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns, but the Ravens almost blew a 28-6 lead in the fourth quarter. One team looks like they are hitting on all cylinders, and another seems to be struggling this year. The Bills at this point in the season just look to be the better team, and so I'm taking the Bills to beat the Ravens and move on to 4-0. Next is the Tennessee Titans versus the Miami Dolphins. Titans look terrible again with Will Levis throwing another 2 interceptions versus the Packers, while the Dolphins without Tua and having Skylar Thompson in a quarterback look like they can't move the ball even with all the weapons they have. So unless the Dolphins go out and sign a veteran quarterback, I actually have the Titans beating the Dolphins here and winning their first game of the season. Lastly, we got the 3-0 Seattle Seahawks versus the Detroit Lions. This is a game that will really tell us if the Seahawks have benefited from a soft starting schedule or if they are actually a good team. Seattle, of course, won versus the Dolphins, holding them to only 3 points and 205 total yards. The Lions, on the other hand, won a tough game versus a sneaky good-looking Cardinals team in which the Lions almost had 200 yards rushing between Montgomery and Gibbs. With this matchup, I feel the Lions are still the better team, and I'm going to take them to win here, but if Seattle finds a way to win, people need to start putting some respect on their name this year, myself included. And that's it for the video. Let me know what you think is going to happen in week 4 and how you have done so far through the first 3 weeks. Other than that, please leave a like and subscribe so you can see more. I'll catch you guys in the next video.